Hello, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Why Set It and Forget It Backup Sucks. I'm Kevin Collins from Unitrends, and I'm here with Joe Noonan, Vice President of Product Marketing, and he'll be taking us through the presentation today. Don't forget, one lucky attendee will be walking away with a $100 Amazon gift card. We'll pull the winner after the event and notify you by email. But before we get started, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. This session will be recorded, and after the event, you'll receive an email with a link to the on-demand version of the webinar. I would also encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. You can do so by typing them into the bottom right of the player. We'll answer your questions at the end of the session. At this point, I'll turn it over to Joe. Enjoy the presentation, and Joe, take it away.
Great, thanks, Kevin, and thanks everybody for joining today. We appreciate you spending some time with us. I hope not to take too much of your time. If we're lucky, at the end of this, I'll have helped you understand maybe a different perspective on a few risks that are out there, and why sort of this concept around set it and forget it, it's so popular and people love to kind of overuse it in a lot of cases. It can be dangerous, and there's just a way of thinking around this in some ways to help you kind of solve some of the problems that we convey here. So first, that's the myth, right? Set it and forget it is something you hear a lot. You hear it a lot with backup. It kind of exposes sort of this ease of use feel. But, you know, in the reality of things, the forget it part is kind of the most dangerous. And I think, you know, when we start thinking about some of the risks that are out there, and here's our doom and gloom slide, right? These big risks that are out there, and I think a lot of folks are getting this now at this point. If you've attended Unitrends webinars, you'll have seen slides like this a few times. But can you really afford to just kind of set and forget your backup and your continuity strategy these days? Right on the left, that 33X, it represents how much faster the environment outpaces the people that implement and manage it, right? It screams for simplicity. And ransomware in the middle, 60%, that's the number of businesses that have been attacked by ransomware. And out of those 60% of businesses that have been attacked by it, 63% were down more than a day. And that leads to our metric on the right here, $700 billion. That was actually the IT downtime cost to North American businesses last year. So you can kind of see here that it becomes really dangerous, I think, to protect, to back up, to replicate, whatever that might be as a part of your overall strategy, even if it's on-site, off-site, all that stuff, cloud. It gets pretty difficult to just kind of forget about those things and not make sure that they're all working and sound. So I'll tell you a true story. And right now you're looking at a picture of a blog post we have on our website. And we did this a little over a year ago when VMware had launched vSphere 6.0. Might have been a year and a half ago. And what happened in that process, so VMware has a feature called change block tracking. And it's an awesome feature. It allows every backup vendor or almost every backup vendor, there's still a few that are a little late to the game to support some of the VMware APIs, but it's an API that allows anyone backing up VMware through those APIs to do very, very fast incremental backups, because we just query the API and it tells us what changed for each VM and each virtual disk since the last backup. We don't have to go and read it to go figure it out, and that saves a ton of time. So it's a phenomenal feature. But VMware had a habit of releasing new code that impacted storage, and under the hood, this API would have issues. And every backup vendor would be susceptible in some way, shape, or form to those issues, because we're all trying to get VM data from that API, and it tells us the wrong data sometimes. So all backups look good. Everything we read looks the same as what we wrote. All verification checks look good. And in the end, you can have completely corrupt backups. And what happened here, and that's a big risk, obviously. There's a lot of VMware environments out there. It's obviously a great hypervisor, especially in the mid-market enterprise space. And this great feature was obviously causing a lot of issues. We had seen, and we have over 15,000 customers at this point, but we had even seen a couple hundred people come in through support with issues around this. And a true story is, you know, one of our really helpful customers in the UK, they had been backing up using our product. They were running vSphere 6. They were replicating, and they had an outage. And everything was looking green on all the backups. They kind of lived this whole set it and forget it way of life. They love that about Unitrends because they thought, this is great. I mean, I can schedule everything. It happens. It's reliable. I can handle both the on-premise piece and then you replicate it. And if I ever need to go to my secondary site for any reason, I can spin up over there. If I ever need to recover anything locally, I could use instant recovery. And this is great. And things were all fat, dumb, and happy during the backup process because they kind of set it and forget it, or forgot it, I should say. And what happened was when they went to go recover, they were hit by this CVT bug. And all their backups for weeks were bad. And they had to basically go through each one to try to find a good one. And this was we took this pretty seriously. We got an announcement from VMware that is pretty under the covers when it comes to, it's certainly public on their website, but not a lot of people understand these types of announcements when they have a bug in one of their APIs. It's really up to the vendors to make sure that people become aware of them. So we actually launched a campaign that alerted everyone of the issue, and we actually started offering capabilities around automated recovery testing that we'll talk about later to people for free for 60 days so they could kind of get out of this jam and start getting used to what it's like to actually take care of the fact that there are risks to data in your backup and it is really difficult to just forget it. So that's why set it and forget it sucks, right? It's definitely the forget it part. We think about why it's so overused and why people speak to it so much. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, and this isn't knocking anyone, it's just when you think about your near-term tasks and activities and budget items right in front of you, backup tends to be kind of the big focus, right? And that narrow view of backup and missing that broader view of continuity and recovery is what can kind of get, organizations into some issues related to, why set it and forget it can run you into problems. And for backup, it certainly makes sense, right? It's a great tagline for all aspects of features in backup because, in the end, people don't want to spend much time on backup, and there's a lot of cool things in backup products like advanced scheduling that'll help you, keep you from having to get back into the product all the time. Automatic discovery, especially in virtual environments, advancements around like that have really helped to allow you to be able to create protection policies. And that way, in a dynamic and virtual environment, you don't have to go in and really do a lot of manual edits when it comes to backup. And then, of course, you need nice, good, simple, granular reporting to understand when things are going well and just to make sure that it's all going well. And most recoveries are granular, right? And outside of the virtual environment, a lot of backups are being done, and sometimes even inside the virtual environment, they're being done at the file level. So whether you're doing a VM backup or a file level backup, when people are coming in and saying, hey, look, I need a file here and there, it can be kind of tough sometimes to understand that, backups are really impacted or bad in those cases, given some of the risks that we just talked about before, like, ransomware and VMware, CVT issues and things like that people can be hit by. So it definitely makes sense in a lot of cases that, set and forget it's a great thing in terms of a message for backup. Although I will say it's easier said than done these days, right? Most people are spending a lot of time filling out surveys and telling that backup vendors some of their issues, and data growth is obviously a very big one, right? It's no picnic here, and this is just a nice description of, kind of building on that first metric we talked about, the environment outpacing the people that implement and manage it. Backup is certainly a challenge. It's no picnic these days, especially with the data growth. But the biggest issues, I think, in a lot of cases are where recovery and continuity come into play. I think, I don't know if a lot of folks are paying attention to this, but you might have seen some announcements around GitLab. GitLab is basically kind of a development website. People do a lot of their coding and testing and things like that directly through their application online. And GitLab went down. Someone deleted a folder, and all their backups, and including the multiple strategies they had, were bad. They were unable to bring it up for many, many hours. Now, by the way, GitLab did a great job of communicating throughout this entire process. I think that they handled it very well from a business perspective, and that is part of continuity. That's a part of disaster recovery, that those plans should include communication. But when you think about the technology and the IT environment, they clearly had more of a set it and forget it approach, and that forgetting part hurt them because their backups in general were unable to help them in that situation. And when we talk about some of these examples, and I know I'm building on this a lot, and I think you get the point at this point, but this is across the board. So we actually did a survey of about 900 folks in our target market. And what you can kind of see in the red pillars here is that as people start looking at broader forms of continuity and disaster recovery as a part of that, that's the #1 issue that people are starting to face these days, right? It's not just about being able to recover locally. They're realizing that, wow, I need to have secondary sites or clouds and strategies to be able to replicate data and bring things up on those other sites and really understand how I'm going to handle major outages, because the business really just requires IT to be up so much. Note the excessive data growth. That was the second challenge, but the two in yellow I think are really interesting as well. Validating backup success and recoverability of data. People are recognizing that these are challenges, and it's reflecting, I think, the fact that people are kind of getting away from the idea that set it and forget is the way to go. So what am I prescribing here? Am I just saying, all right, well, let's just go spend 10 hours a day doing recovery testing all the time? Because, obviously, Joe, you just said it's a really big deal, and we should make sure that we're verifying that recovery is going to work. But, naturally, obviously, I have a day job, and I don't really want to spend all my time on recovery testing. Hell, I don't want to spend my time on backup. I came from the VM backup space a few years ago, and back then I worked with a lot of users in virtualization who they were virtualization admins, and they took on the backup piece because their portion of the environment was smaller in terms of being critical to the overall business. And they love virtualization features. They love getting in there and working with products that were virtualization centric, so they liked working with backup products. But now, the same exact customers I talk to today, as they grow their environments and they become much more critical to the business, they don't want to spend time on backup. They don't want to spend time on continuity. They know they have to. It's important. We just talked about all the reasons why it's important. But they would much rather be spending their time helping to make their applications run faster, helping to deploy applications faster, helping to increase the service levels to the organization. And that's really a big key that I think Unitrends tried to attack here in driving these kind of 6 core benefits to allow folks to spend less time on backup, have more flexible solutions that will grow as their continuity strategy grows, and obviously help them focus much more on their free time or on their professional time driving value to the business. And on that slide, and I didn't mention the word, but the last part, one of the later benefits there was more confidence, right? And that confidence is key here for this topic. When we talk about forget it being kind of the negative part of that whole set it and forget it world, that really has to go to confidence in a lot of ways. How do you gain that confidence? And recovery assurance is really one of the ways that we focus on providing that extra confidence for IT admins, business leaders, IT directors, and even CEOs. You just want to be able to have confidence that your firm is going to be able to be productive and compete in the marketplace. And the big thing that you're focusing on here is that rather than praying that backups work, rather than looking at kind of the old world where DR was rarely tested, and it might take hours and hours to spend trying to report on DR, trying to report on this compliance factor, trying to say, oh yeah, I've actually done my due diligence, done my work, and everything is working, and here's how I can prove it to you. That took a lot of time back in the day. It was very, very manual, and most solutions still force you to do this. And this is where I think Unitrends starts to differentiate. We fully automate this process, and it's really automation around physical and virtual machines, and doing recovery testing as well as failover and automating that whole process when an outage occurs to make sure that what you've tested gets run perfectly. And what you would need to go through in a real outage has been tested, and that workflow has been executed, and you've seen it work over and over and over again. And as obviously the environment changes, we can catch issues that are configuration related and things like that as a result of this continuous testing and the reporting. So it proactively uncovers those issues, which is nice. What I also like is that the reports that it automates are actually very, very business level. And I think that's important when you think of recovery assurance, continuity, and DR. Like those are very business level functions They help an organization stay productive. And so does backup, don't get me wrong, but in backup, you know, if something goes wrong, you want to be able to kind of get right into the nitty-gritty very quickly as an admin. From a DR perspective, when you're talking about compliance reporting, you want something that's going to look nice and pretty and be presentable to executives. And our recovery assurance capabilities allow you to do that in an automated fashion. And it's available locally in your local environments. You can make sure things are going to work locally for recovery. They can work at a DR site. You're replicating off to your own DR site. And the Unitrends cloud option for folks that don't have a secondary site is where we can provide that as a part of our service as well. So this is a little bit of a view of one of those reports we talked about. So, and I'm sure you cannot read all the words on here, but the idea is that you get this sort of high-level business-centric reporting that shows compliance. The testing is advanced. We get into the application. We'll actually be able to, you know, query SQL databases to make sure that the data is working, the database is responsive, it's connecting properly into other dependent virtual machines that might offer specific services to the database, such as Active Directory, for instance. Web servers can do website checks, check for responsiveness, check for speed. A lot of these are built right into the product, just point and click tests that literally go into that kind of end tier application and make sure it all works. But even if you're much more simplistic in your environment, and you have a lot of individual virtual machines, you just want to make sure that they work, it's still just as easy to set this up and make sure that you're automating and reporting on each individual machine. But I think the point is, as you get into more enterprise level applications with multiple machines working together, it's not working unless all those machines are up, running, working together in the right orders and all that kind of stuff. There's a workflow that's in process to make those function in an outage, and actually we'll be able to test that whole workflow. Now, when we think about the need for confidence, there is a new trend that this is starting to push, and I think you're going to hear a lot more about it. And the term for this trend is IT resilience. Gartner has actually just started writing some research around this. What they have now, and certainly if you have a Gartner subscription, recommend you checking this out. They have a market guide for what they call IT resilience orchestration automation, ITRO automation. So this market guide is not a magic quadrant. It's not an analysis of which vendor's better than others. It's not a ranking system. But this market guide is helping you understand a little bit about this world of IT resilience. Who are the players in it now, given that it's very, very early and kind of in its infancy, and who's taking strides and moving quickly to be able to deliver this. And there's not that many backup vendors in this at all. And we'll talk a little bit about Unitrends and some of its unique positioning. But before we get into that, just help you understand a little bit more about what IT resilience really means here. So we talk about improved IT serviceability. And recovery and integrity, I think, go along. It's pretty obvious. But I think the key thing is what I mentioned before when we talked about being able to ensure that enterprise applications are working properly. You're not talking about an individual machine or a file being properly protected. You're talking about making sure that IT services are available. And those services are what business users really get value from. And those services, obviously you all know this, are typically going to be comprised of applications that could have many machines working in conjunction to deliver that service. So being application focused across virtual, physical, and even cloud workloads, and making sure all that works from a business perspective, that's really what they're focusing on with IT resilience. It's not just, you know, individual data integrity. And the way to achieve it, and you're going to see that this is pretty familiar. Obviously, the way to achieve it here is automation and sequencing and orchestration, right? Being able to interact with the APIs and hypervisors, physical servers, applications, backups, and being able to obviously orchestrate all the processes that are needed to provide an automated recovery of an IT service. And of course, data integrity is a big part of this as well, right? So this involves testing to make sure things are going to work, but most importantly, being able to fail over and get back. And that's ultimately how you achieve IT resilience here. And I think there's actually some other use cases that are pretty interesting around IT resilience and recovery assurance, and you know, ransomware is a big one. Ransomware it comes up so much. We talked about it earlier. You're probably inundated with vendors about this because it really is a threat, and people are worried about it. People want to make sure that they can handle it if it ever happens to them. I actually wrote a blog, so this is the second time I'm plugging our blog on the Unitrends website. It's got a lot of good stuff out there if you're ever interested in checking it out. And we have a blog out there that talks about, you know, how you can even prevent ransomware from spreading more throughout the environment using your backups, right? And it really goes back to this idea of recovery assurance. You can automate testing for a lot of different things, including security checks. That can be scripted on your own or scripts provided by a vendor. We actually have some in-house that we've been able to give to some people in certain cases when they were hit by ransomware, and we kind of gave them some interesting scripts that they could use with their recovery assurance processes so that they could actually go and proactively check from their backups if anything had been hit, and it would give, obviously that doesn't prevent ransomware completely, but it can prevent it from spreading. And I think that's another aspect of IT resilience is being able to incorporate other attacks to your IT environment into this workflow process so that you can stave them off, mitigate them, and ultimately increase your confidence. So I think the big point here is that recovery assurance is a term Unitrends delivers with its products. You'll see this as a part of our features with our Recovery Series backup appliances and our Unitrends backup virtual appliances. And this is obviously what we believe drives IT resilience. And it's not just Unitrends running around saying this. I think something that's pretty interesting is we're proving in the market that we're adapting faster than any other vendor that started out basically with backup and has moved to more advanced disaster recovery and IT resilience types of functionality. We are actually the only solution that's recognized in all three major Gartner publications around data protection. So that's the backup Magic Quadrant, where many vendors were dropped last year, but Unitrends obviously, maintained its spot in this, which is an enterprise-focused, greater than 1,000 employee Magic Quadrant, and we obviously have a big mix of customers in the mid-market space and in the SMB, and we serve those very, very well. But our capabilities have actually allowed us to be recognized more in the enterprise space, which is great for the company. The DR as a Service Magic Quadrant, our first inclusion in this one was last year as a visionary. And this is based on, the Unitrends cloud, our capabilities around AWS and Azure as well, but primarily what we're doing with our white glove service around the Unitrends cloud. And then, of course, the ITRO market guide that we just talked about for IT resilience. When you look at all three of these publications, we're really the only one mentioned in both that Magic Quadrants. It shows even additional differentiation and innovation in the company to already be, listed in that IT resilience, where really you're getting more point products being listed there that are specific to disaster recovery, not something that can handle the whole gambit of backup, DR, and IT resilience. So I think that coverage across all three of those, being able to handle virtual and physical environments very well on premise from a data protection perspective, but extending to DR as a service, if you have a secondary site of your own, just, private cloud DR, and IT resilience, this is what helps get people to where they want to be in terms of not having to worry too much about backup and continuity. Now, I'm not telling you we get to set it and forget it, because I still don't think you can forget it. But at the same time, with automation, that piece about forgetting it, well, we can help you really make that a lot less burdensome on you, because you're just kind of making sure and checking reports, kind of like you would with backup, that things are going well. But naturally, your IT environment's going to change, configurations are going to change, that can change workflows within your DR strategy. We can help recovery test those and find issues related to those configuration changes to make sure that you're keeping your DR site obviously up to date as well. And to the extent that we can replicate those changes, if they're within the metadata that we can collect in a virtual or physical environment, we will do that for you. And in the end, I think that's what's really bringing confidence to this whole process. So if you want me to repeat all that, in summary, very quickly, it really hurts to forget it. And that's why I said it and forget it sucks. You want to look to add recovery assurance to your continuity strategy, right? Your continuity strategy, it doesn't mean you have to have the most advanced strategy. You may not be doing things with a secondary site. You may not be doing things with cloud yet if you don't have a secondary site. Hopefully you're thinking about those things if you're not doing it yet. But in general, I definitely recommend, looking at incorporating some of this recovery testing capability to make sure that, you don't kind of fall, prey to the set it and forget it myth that we mentioned before. And achieving IT resilience, right? This is something I think it's a cool term, and it's something I think for folks to be able to strive to say, like, we're resilient to many issues. There's always going to be something new coming our way. And capabilities that we talked about here today are ways to help you kind of stave off things, even new things, by just being, very, very solid in your planning and ensuring that you can automate as much as possible. So I think in terms of what we do next, our website has a lot of great material on this. So does our blog, by the way, which you can find from our website. We have a lot of free trials. Unitrends Backup can be downloaded, and Recovery Assurance is a part of that download. So you can fill out the form and try those out for yourself for 30 days. Heck, if you wanted to do it with a backup appliance and see how it works, within the hardware, we can send you the hardware too. We can certainly help you learn more with a live demo, and folks from the company are always here to answer questions whenever you need them. And obviously, I'm here for the rest of this webinar to answer questions. And for a few more weeks, we are giving away a $5,000 home lab for anyone that goes and downloads and deploys a 30-day trial or requests an evaluation unit from Unitrends. So if you want something really, really cool for your home lab, and sometimes home labs can be better than what you see in some production environments and organizations in the SMB world. If you want to get something really cool to play around with in-house and learn and kind of, develop your career with the technology right there at home, Unitrends can help you. This is a really cool giveaway, and the only way to get involved is to go to our website and download the trial Unitrends Backup or requested evaluation unit of the recovery series, and off you go. So, Kevin, I think at this point we are ready to go for the Q&A.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Great presentation. There's still time to ask a question. You can do so by typing it into the box in the bottom right of the player, and we'll get started right away here. First question is Recovery Assurance a standalone product or an integrated feature of your backup product?
It's a good point. I didn't go into, the details about Unitrends Backup and Recovery Series, but just to level set here. So it's a feature. It's available as an integrated component of the Recovery Series, which is a physical appliance. That appliance is Linux-based, and the Unitrends Backup virtual appliances are obviously Linux-based virtual appliances as well. You'll see a button for recovery assurance, and you'll see a term reliable DR in there. And that's because it was actually acquired a long time ago. It was a standalone product. We've integrated it, and it's even going to be further integrated in about a month and a half into the actual Linux installation. But for now, it's a separate component of the architecture that integrates with our backups. It integrates with the hypervisor. It integrates with the applications and does all of the workflow orchestration and automation that you would need to make sure recovery is going to work.
Okay, and a follow-up to that, backup and recovery is integrated, but what about the DR?
So I think what this might be getting at, Kevin, is that so disaster recovery is obviously a core component of continuity strategies, right? Unitrends Backup and Recovery Series will handle both the backup and recovery piece as well as replication, which is all done very efficiently. You get nice secure connections between sites. That can be a second site of your own. It can be a colo of your own. It can be an MSP that that's leveraging Unitrends, or it can be the Unitrends cloud. And we can handle that replication and leverage our instant recovery capabilities for both physical and virtual machines to make sure that we can spin those up, do automated testing that are not impacting your production environments whatsoever. And if you ever need to fail over, you just push the button and we execute that workflow and bring those up in a production environment at a secondary location. So yes, it's all basically fully encompassed in one solution.
Okay. Why is recovery assurance any better than integrity verification using checksums?
Okay, good question. So there are a lot of products out there, and Unitrends as well, that will do data integrity checking specifically at kind of the block level. So when you write something, you read it back, you check the hash, all that kind of stuff, and you make sure that it works. And when I say works, you make sure that what you wrote is the same thing you read. So think about that VMware CBT scenario that we talked about. Everything VMware gave us was what we thought it was supposed to give us. Everything we checked on the other side in our integrity checking checked out okay. Yet all the blocks were misaligned because the data from the API was incorrect. And therefore, that meant that your VMs were pretty much toast and they weren't coming up. So recovery assurance is actually making sure that that entire recovery process is being tested. That's the difference. I think integrity checking is good at the block level, but it doesn't show you that recovery is going to work. Therefore, you don't have that confidence level that we're trying to help people get to around recovery. And it also has nothing to do with applications, right? It's all at the block level. So there are configuration issues that could also impact recovery that have nothing to do with the data itself. And that's actually something recovery assurance can help with too.
Okay. Where does the recovery testing happen?
So it happens basically in any location where you actually set up your workflows with the product. So it can be local if you want, or you can just execute it at a DR site, or you can let Unitrends do it in the Unitrends cloud. But what we actually do is we'll spin up both physical and virtual machines within a hypervisor environment, VMware vSphere supported today, and we'll basically do all of the testing within that isolated VMware vSphere environment. So the applications and the VMs that are being spun up can network with each other so that we obviously get application consistency and functionality can be tested, but they're isolated from your production application.
Okay. Question is, you guys provide a web portal for accessing the backups for restoring it. So what happens if the website goes down?
So we do not run our access to the Unitrends cloud off of the website. The portal that you access to gain, I'm going to overuse the word access here by accident, but the portal that you use to gain access to your data in the Unitrends cloud is basically served from your on-premise recovery series and Unitrends backup appliance for any types of granular recoveries that you might need to pull down. So obviously, if you don't have a site-wide outage and you need to just go and get data from the Unitrends cloud, you can do that right from on-premise. And an internet connection doesn't matter. Internet connection is obviously important to make sure that you can access it, but you're not bound from the user interface perspective of having to access something over the internet like you can with some of our competitors. That question is, that's one part to the question. So I'm going to elaborate further because I think there's other facets you might be asking about. So a disaster happens and your site is down. And with your site down, how do you initiate failover? So Unitrends offers a white glove service. Through a very simple support call, we can initiate failover automatically for you. And that whole workflow that we've set up internally, we've worked with you to make sure that we're setting up properly. And obviously, if you're a part of our recovery assurance service, we've been testing that for you very regularly. So in that sense, that's where we have this idea of a white glove service, is that we will manage the aspects of DR for you with the Unitrends cloud so that you can call us because your site is down, you don't have internet, to basically initiate a failover. We can handle that for you.
Okay. Let's see. Next question is, I know I can recover a machine onto your backup appliance. Can recovery assurance be performed on the appliance itself?
Good question. So yes, we can recover onto the appliance a physical Windows, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say physical, a guest level Windows backup. So it could be a virtual machine or a physical machine, but it's using an agent. And we can basically stand that up on the appliance and run it there. There is a level of recovery assurance built in there. It is not what I would call IT resilience or the full recovery assurance where you're basically getting workflow types of automation done there. But after backups are updated, we can basically update your standby on our appliance, and we will actually spin it up and do a screenshot test. So I think that gives you some verification that we've been able to boot and see that VM boot. I don't think it gives you full recovery assurance because you haven't seen that particular machine work with other machines and come up and actually totally function at the application level. But at least you've gotten that boot level verification. So there's always kind of your good, better, best view of these things, right? Good is data integrity checking. That's great. You know, good job. We know that the blocks that we thought were written properly, but a lot can go wrong there still, right? So better is being able to see it boot, but best is naturally making sure that your applications are fully functional with the other machines that depend on that application. And that's where you get full recovery assurance. That has to take place on a hypervisor, either vSphere or Hyper-V.
Okay. Next question is, are you able to keep the replicated data in your cloud restricted to servers within a certain state? We have some strict restrictions on certain law enforcement data.
So we do have plenty of capabilities around access. What I would say there is, you know, when you start getting into some really strict requirements, it's always best to be able to test the product out or get on the phone with an SC to kind of really be able to flesh out your specific needs. But certainly there are access control capabilities within the Unitrends cloud and in our user interface to ensure that, you know, the right people are seeing the data and all that good stuff.
All right. Does the recovery testing run on a schedule?
It does. It does. So, and it's a good thing to clarify because I talk about automation, but naturally it's not something that you go and have to push a button to do a test. The scheduling will allow you to do it, you know, hourly, daily, weekly, whatever that might be. And what's pretty interesting is you can schedule, you know, different frequencies for different applications. You can have tier 1 applications that you test more frequently than tier 2 and tier 3. And you know, it's almost set it and forget it, but I'm not going to say to do that because even still, I don't think it's right to forget it. You want to make sure that you're checking on these things just so that you know that your recovery plans are working, but we're going to give you nice automated reports to help you understand that.
Okay. Here's a kind of a two-part question. Is our solution agent or agentless? And if the agent is corrupted, will they get notified automatically or do they have to manually check it?
I think I'm going to answer this one the right way, but let me know if I don't. So the product's both agent and agentless. We believe that there's flexible reasons to use both, even in a highly virtualized or even 100% virtualized environment. Some machines you may want to protect more granularly. So an agent can help you do that. An agent is good for physical machines, obviously. It's required in most of those cases. And obviously for virtual machines, we can integrate into the hypervisor APIs for VMware, for Hyper-V, and for Citrix Zen Server to do all agentless protection at the hypervisor level for those hypervisors. So you get both options, and that's good. If there's corruption at the agent, would you be alerted? I'm going to take that question and I'll reword it so that you know where I'm trying to answer here, and let me know again if I get it wrong. But I think you're asking, you know, if an agent-based backup contains corruption, will you get alerted of that? And the answer is, if you're, we do our integrity checking, so naturally we do obviously, you know, alert folks of block level issues, but with recovery assurance that will span both physical and virtual, whether it's an agent-based backup or an agentless backup, and we can give you that obviously alert as well there through our recovery assurance technology. Re-ask the question, please, if I missed you on what you were trying to get at there, because I want to make sure that I answer it for you.
Okay, next question is recovery insurance like high availability? Will it automatically detect an outage and failover?
So we don't do automatic outage detection, and that's on purpose. So it's not high availability. We use the term continuity specifically because high availability is much more ingrained at typically the agent level between applications in both sites, and you have kind of a hot site where both are running the entire time, and there's just continuous writes going to both of those machines. They stay in sync the whole time. If one cuts down, you never even notice it. That's what I view high availability. Continuity is different, right? We're talking about using backups. We're replicating in a much more cost-effective manner than having two standbys, both staying in sync and being up the entire time. And we're leveraging really cool instant recovery capabilities to limit downtime to, you know, very small amounts. The Unitrends Cloud, for instance, Recoveries are typically very fast, but we actually put an SLA on it of an hour for what you need to recover. And that 1 hour SLA truly is documented. It's something that you don't typically see from other vendors. They will give promises. They'll say, we guarantee we can do this because our technology is good enough. Well, our technology is good enough too, but we're actually able to put it in writing. So I don't view that as high availability. I view that as continuity being a little bit different. And I think that's kind of the core part there is there's going to be an outage where we don't necessarily know if you're ready to fail over sites, right? That outage could be something that you want to recover locally because you may have the local capability to do that. And because of that, it's pretty dangerous to kind of initiate, not dangerous necessarily, but it can be unwanted to do a full site failover, something that's a little bit more invasive, then take care of it locally. And that's why it's good to have a backup solution doing this versus just kind of a replication solution, because you can leverage your backup solution. You can leverage one vendor basically to handle the local piece if you want to handle it locally, or you can fail over. The entire failover process is automated. You're pushing a button for that, and that's it. But you're going to push the button on failover because it is pretty invasive at that point, and we want to make sure that that is truly a failover scenario. And like we mentioned before with the Unitrends Cloud, if you don't have a button to push, we can push the button for you.
Okay. We're just about out of time here, so there's one more question that we'll get to, and then we'll wrap it up. Joe, can you talk anything about kind of pricing and licensing for our products?
Sure. Not only can I talk, it's all on our website. We're pretty open about the Recovery Series pricing, as well as the licensing for Unitrends Backup and all the pricing associated with it there. We price Unitrends Backup Virtual Appliances, which is software. That's priced per server for physical server that we protect, and it's priced per socket based on the virtual environments we protect. Our kind of, enterprise class, and our software is enterprise class, but when we say enterprise class, our highly scalable physical appliances that go all the way up to, almost 200 terabytes in a single box. Those are, the pricing is online, it's priced per box. There are no agent fees and things like that. Today, recovery assurance is something you can add to that as well. And obviously, the reason we keep that as an add-on is you may not want to do it locally. You may want to use Unitrends Cloud to do it, and we can do that in Unitrends Cloud for you. So we let you manage that pricing accordingly with Recovery Series.
Okay. Well, Joe, thank you so much. It was a great presentation. Good questions came in. Just want to remind everybody that we will be sending a follow-up email within the next day or so. With the link to the on-demand version of the webinar. We'll also make sure that we announce the $100 gift card winner in that email as well. We want to thank everybody for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Take care, everybody.
Thanks. Take care.